Hello, everybody. Our journey takes us across the pond today to Scotland for a delightful discussion with Wendy Harris, Making Conversations Count. Stick around. Our book about improving customer experiences is now in audiobook format on Amazon, Audible, and iTunes. Well, hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to SimpleBiz360 podcast. We are so excited today to go across the pond over to the UK, and we have Wendy Harris with us today. Wendy, would you be kind enough to just say hello and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, hello, everybody that listens to the 360 podcast. It's so exciting to be here. I'm coming from Scotland. It's a bit grey and dull today. You know, us Brits love to talk about the weather, but my specialty really is about making conversations count and really helping you with your confidence to talk to strangers.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for being on the show. Now, Wendy and I got connected through LinkedIn, which you're going to find out later a little bit more about. And so we are going to just jump into this. It's really, I think, going to be an exciting show, especially if you're a small business owner and you've had that anxiety level. You've just, it's a little nerve-wracking to get on the phone and try to call customers or try to prospect or do things. So it's going to be a little bit of a sales angle today for sure. But nonetheless, Wendy has a compelling story. And I'd like, Wendy, if you could start and just let us know, where did you grow up and what was the family makeup, if you don't mind?
Well, I was an only child until I was 10. But my mum and dad divorced when I was about 6 years old. So the blended family that I have now is of various brothers and sisters from various relationships. Which makes for a very interesting childhood and lots of questions, lots of grown-up questions. And I think that's kind of bled into, my personality and my makeup as I've been growing up, to question what's going on and to understand the reasoning behind certain actions and influences on our life. And my good old pop, may he rest in peace still, he just said, Wendy, never stop asking questions until you run out of questions.
Good advice, right? Yeah. Well,
sure. Yeah.
So did this, I glean from your book that your childhood put you into an early state of independence, if you will, at a fairly young age. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, when my mum and dad split up at 6, I was mortified to be, in my eyes of a 6-year-old, wrenched from my dad, who was, he was the apple of my eye, really. Yeah. He had a long-distance driving job, so when he was home, he was present, and it was a big hole when he was gone. So I already felt that. So to have him removed and not come home at all, and to be moved to somewhere else to call home, was a really big deal for me. So I grew up quite quickly, and as I've mentioned, those different relationships and other siblings that, coming into the mix was an interesting dynamic when you are used to having all of the attention. So I did slip off the rails, and I know I talk about it in my book, and I stopped going to school when I was 7 years old, and I was put on probation to make me go to school, to keep an eye on me, because my mum wasn't very present, even though she was my primary carer. So I just used to hide, go and make dens. I had a dog and my bike, and we'd just head off out into the woods and spend the days. And one day somebody noticed. And a lot of the young children that were going to probation were generally a little older than me and possibly leaning towards more criminal activities, pinching sweets from the shop or vandalism and that sort of thing. So in actual fact, my probation officer was so lovely. He was like a big, cuddly uncle. And he just said, Wendy, you're not bad. There's not a bad bone in you, but you are just disconnected from everything that was going on. And he actually got me back in the room, if you like, through music and Adam Ant, of all things.
There you go. Yeah.
Strange.
Well, hey, listen, you're talking to the wrong guy about music and influence because, I'm a British invasion guy. Matter of fact, we're in the middle of a little tribute to the Mersey beat. So, no, music, I think, has a significant, part to many of our lives, and it plays a big role, and it inspires us, or it just can help us through a lot of situations. Well, you had to grow up fast. It certainly sounds like it, and I can relate to you a little bit. I was arrested numerous times as a juvenile. It was more mischievous than anything. I probably, if someone had said something similar, you're not bad, you're just disconnected, I think that would have resonated with me. But, I just kind of heard that I was, you were bad. And, but it did force you to realize that there's that side of the fence, and there's that lowly feeling. And you don't have to accept that, and you can work out of that, which I'm going to let you tell your story, how you did that. But, that's certainly, that was your lowest point, right? That was you're finding yourself in that process.
7 was probably a bit too young to even realize that I was. So, another marriage on mom's side came along, and some stability. But a very strict stepdad.
Okay.
And I hated him with a passion. I actually made it my mission for him to hate me back, and he just never did. He was solid. He was, a disciplinarian, and would not accept my behavior. To the point where sometimes he would just ignore it, which was really infuriating. And then when him and my mom were not getting along any longer, it became a real toxic environment, and I just didn't want to be there. Yeah. I'd got, my sister was a baby. I was 13 when she was born. And, I'd spent a bit of time living with my dad, but he'd got a new wife with 2 young children, and she hated me, and she didn't see why she had to look after me. And it was just, looking back on it, it's no wonder it was such a mess. Nobody really knew what they were doing. Yeah. And so I stopped going to school again.
Wow.
And how I got out of school with qualifications, I'll only know. But it's maturity, I think, that helps you, doesn't it, Jeff? Look back and say, there was so much going on at home. There was one teacher, and I'm still friends with him on Facebook to this day.
That's great.
And we reach out on birthdays and Christmas, and
great.
Little anniversaries of achievements.
That's great.
And Mr. Ritchie took me under his wing and got me involved in the drama club, the swim club. And he knew that if he had drama on a Monday, swim club on a Tuesday, drama on a Wednesday, netball on a Thursday, and there was something else. It was like twice a week for drama, twice a week for swimming, and netball. He knew he could get me to school every day because that was why I was going. Yeah. I wasn't going for school. I was just going for that. And then at high school, I didn't have that connection with a teacher. Yeah. And because everything was falling apart at home, I just failed to go. And I do genuinely believe that it was because I wasn't applied.
Sure.
There was nobody that recognised in that mass of kids that I was struggling. And I realised that I'd learned from a very early age to put such a brave face on everything and to appear fine, that nobody thought they needed to ask either.
Yeah, wow.
And I certainly wasn't going to ask because everybody at home had let me down before. So why were they going to be any different? So occasionally I'd knock on Mr. Ritchie's door And he'd sit there with a whiskey, because he was a Scotsman, and he'd say, "You know the answer to this question, Wendy. You've just got to believe in it, decide, go do it, and you'll see it'll be fine." Yeah. And it's still advice that is good
that's
today.
Great. I mean, that's really nice that you were able to identify with a person who was able to, shepherd you and mentor you and really, kind of knew you had some special gifts to the world, but and I mean, I can just tell reading your book and listening to you're definitely somebody that has a lot to give, and here you were kind of trapped in this world of a lot of things going on that are affecting you, and you've got to put a brave face on, and that's not really the way you feel. And you mentioned something as you get into phone sales later, that initially it was your way to escape. Right?
Yeah. It was drama club all over again. You could be whoever you wanted to be. You could see somebody acting in a certain way, and you could try it out, because over the phone nobody can see you, they can only hear you. There's so many people that I would speak to in my early career. With account management, you'd speak to them at the same time every week, take their order, have a quick chat, and go away. And the company decided to do away days where the office staff could go and meet the customers. Thought it was going to be a really great exercise for the staff and for the customers, to bond one thing. And of course, I got my job at 17, when the advert said no one under the age of 21 need apply. Yet I wrote in and said, could you just give me some experience? I've been working since I was 13, and without experience, you won't see me. Without age, you won't see me. Trust me, I'm older than my years. I used to go to the pub with my dad at 17, and they thought I was his girlfriend. So I've always looked, about 30. So it was. They gave me the opportunity, and we went out into the field to meet customers that I'd been speaking to for the best part of 2 years. There I am, not a 19-year-old young lady, and they were like, "That's not Wendy. Mm-hmm. That can't be Wendy. She's older than that."
Wow.
And it's the perception that you portray over the phone in being able to be whatever you want to be. But there are some caveats to doing that. And I know that it's one of your questions.
Yeah. Well, very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, you experience this up front, but and then you launch off, and you're now in I'm now talking to someone who's been in business for 30 years. Could you just describe today, what would the calling of Wendy Harris be today? What's your place in the business world today? What drives you to?
I'm more and more than ever before. I see conversation taking a step back in business. Yet that's fundamentally what drives the success of a business, and the success of a business doesn't necessarily have to be profit led. For me, it's people led. The more people that are involved in your business, the more successful you are. So I actually nod my cap to people like, Jeff Bezos, because whilst there are complications around his financial status, right, and how he operates, look at how many people he's serving, and look at how many people are serving his business that otherwise would not be in work. So for me, my calling is to encourage that conversation, even with strangers. Practice at the checkout, practice when you're queuing for the bus or the train, say good morning to strangers as you're passing them in the street. I think we've lost that connection. Yes. So, I just see too much isolation and reliance on other methods that ultimately lead to a conversation that maybe are disingenuous.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering that. And folks, the reason I asked Wendy that question is because I know from just a brief conversation and meeting her that she has a servant's heart. This is her book, and I hope you can see it. It's available on Amazon. We will have the links on our show notes on the YouTube experience. So if you're watching this on YouTube, that's where you'll find it. You'll also be able to just go on to Amazon and search for it. We're also going to be on 28 audio platforms here today too. So if you want to listen to this interview, but in reading the book and in talking to Wendy, I sensed there was this real servant's heart. The book, I will tell you, is short, very quick read. Wendy, you are very direct. You are very succinct. There's either meat on that plate, there's fish on that plate, there's protein on that plate, folks. You will not find a lot of, applesauce and peas and beans. I mean, the book is great. It just zeroes in and boom, gives you what you need. And it's a nice reference book. You can go back, you can earmark and dogmark the pages that, were applicable to you. You can go back and relook at it, and Wendy gets right to the point. So it's a very good book in that sense. To inspire you to be, as Wendy just mentioned, more engaged in resurrecting the conversation process. Because I'm in agreement with you, Wendy. We are missing it. We're missing that human decency of saying hello to strangers, to passersby. We've lost that reciprocity. People asking us about how our day is, and we don't even ask them about theirs. There's no give and take. We're just missing it. And we're relying on texting and emailing and all this electronic digital communication. We're forgetting. We literally, we all have stories about loved ones being on the same couch and they're texting each other. I mean, it's really crazy sometimes,
We're in the age of the stoop.
Yeah. So we
Jeff,
really,
that's why I call it the stoop, where your head's down like this, stooped over your phone. And it's like, look up, look around you, be present.
Oh, Wendy, I couldn't agree more. And, holidays, family gatherings are really encouraged that exact statement to apply. Take that to those family gatherings and make sure that you're putting that phone down and that you are, engaging in remembering the process, looking at people face to face. I mean, we're losing that art, and it's alienating a lot of us in a way. So, great stuff. Well, so Jane, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Pallister,
Yes.
wrote the foreword to your book. And folks, I just want to read you what Jane said. And she basically describes Wendy as someone who talks sense, oozes practicality, and gets to the nub of the communication problem quickly. And I assume that's addressing your consulting type of an angle. But I reading your book, I have to agree. Wow, it's just sensible, practical beyond compare, and I can tell that you really know how to pinpoint some of the issues. So talk about how that leads your consulting business today and leads you and guides you in what you do on a daily basis now.
Gosh, well, I have to thank Jane really, because she's got more ologies after her name than I've got fingers and toes. She's a really, really educated and pragmatic lady. Do you know, it's strange, isn't it? Because I do a lot of what I do now through habit and just knowing, rather than thinking too hard about things. So when she says I talk sense and ooze practicality, it's not that I haven't got time for people. It's just, if I can be the eyes looking in, that somebody's asked me for my opinion based on my 30 years of experience, then I'm going to give it you, and I'm going to deliver it honestly. I will try to be gentle, but of course, sometimes it can be as plain as the nose on your face, and you can't see it because we become so invested in our own businesses that you do need to get that perspective. So I think where I step in is to be able to say, well, look, ask the questions. Well, look at it from this perspective then. Now look at it from the other side's perspective, and you'll find that hole, and that's the problem that needs fixing.
Yeah. Very good. Well, I appreciate that explanation. And so what do you, could you explain what you actually mean when you say, speak your truth in all you do? What are you getting at when you're saying that?
Well, this leads me back to the you can be anything you want to be when you're on the phone caveat. Because whilst you can, lean into being a character, and you can lean into copying somebody else's personality type, ultimately, if you do that all the while, you lead yourself down a road of ill health and bad alignment. And I speak from experience that I was in a job many years ago and I really didn't like it. And I would use that terminology, and you've perhaps heard it yourself, Jeff, smile when you dial. And of course, your voice and everything changes immediately. And you sit up and your arm, your shoulders go back and da-da! Yeah. So you're performing. But the effort and the energy that takes, if you're doing that, in some instances, we were pushing 100, 120 dials a day. Mm-hmm. You have to do that 120 times a day. That actually takes a strain on you.
Sure.
And I caused myself to go dumb because I would get throat infections. I would put a strain, and your voice is a tool, so you have to look after it. So when I say speak your truth, I mean just be you.
Yeah. Okay. So let that authenticity, let that genuineness flow out of what you're saying, how you're speaking. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And Wendy, that is so critical, I think, for solopreneurs and entrepreneurs, because let's face it, and I wrote this in my book that, I'm writing a book to a lot of people who don't necessarily want to be salesy. They don't want to get up and do a sales pitch, although, everything business revolves around a transaction. Eventually you have to ask for the business or somehow come to an agreement on transaction terms. But, that's a very intimidating process, that getting on the phone and doing all this. So I think this is sage advice and just comforting words from someone, folks, who, if you're out there and you're listening to this, and Wendy's done this all her career, be yourself, be natural. You don't have to put an act on. Just let yourself bleed through and speak the truth in all you do, as she says. So that's, wow. I mean, great advice. So, and in that sense, Wendy, correct me if I'm wrong, I get the impression you really have fun at what you do. And there you go. You're smiling. For those who can't see her, she's smiling right now, and she's in agreement. How can you encourage people who suffer that high stress and anxiety from the phones to have it become fun for them?
Do you know, I think, Jeff, it comes down to managing your expectations of the outcome of the activity.
Okay.
And a lot of it is down to, setting KPIs. You've got to have this many dials, and, you get hold of somebody and they didn't buy off me. Well, kids, nobody buys the first call ever.
Right.
I can recall maybe 2 conversations in 2 million that somebody has turned around and said, do you know what? That has just gone on my to-do list. That's on my priority list right now for me to begin looking at.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that they're going to choose you and that they're going to do it today. Right. Everything that you do when you pick up the phone is about as much making sure that you want to be working with these people. So, put the customer first always in what you do. Is it right for them? Are they the right person? Is it the right reason for you to be having a conversation? And then is it the right time for that conversation? So those expectations take away that anxiety, because if you're going to make, for example, 50 calls a day, which is highly achievable, and the law of average says you may reach 4 or 5 people to actually have a conversation with, chances are all you're going to be doing is finding out whether it's right for them, when the timing's going to be right, and how you can potentially help them, and when you can next have a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Great advice. You know, so folks, Wendy and I have some similarities with Wendy's background. I spent about 5 years in telephone sales. And yes, you know, making 52, 55 calls a day was, you know, because you're going to have a good 12 conversations and 3, great qualified opportunities or whatever. You know, these averages fall into place, and it's a tiring day, just dialing 50 calls. I also, Wendy, you'll love this. I used to work in downtown Manhattan, and so we had to make appointments for face-to-face appointments. And so that's all we were allowed to do. And there were 12 phone banks. So picture this room with nothing on the walls, and there were just 12 phone stalls in 1985. And you had to sign up for an hour, and you had to go into the stall for an hour. They cut off all outside area codes, so you could only call within the 212 New York City area code. And you had your list, and we had to have about 100 names written out, phone numbers, names, and companies of who we wanted to try to get an appointment with. And we had 1 hour, and they wanted us to crank out about 80 to 100 phone calls. And believe it or not, yeah, you could do it because you're only asking, you're asking for an appointment. So there's, people aren't answering, they're not there. You get through it quick, but I mean, that was tiring. And so I say all that to say, yeah, I mean, Wendy and Wendy in her book, and I love this about your book, and I'm going to kind of stay with that concept and leap over into, understanding the numbers of phone calling. We had to make 80 to 100 calls in that hour to get an appointment. My target for a full day was 50. Wendy says 50 is, certainly a healthy day on her end. But you talk about the numeric ratios that you have to understand it. And I'd also like you to touch on, which I didn't see, is, how did you prepare for that day? Did you write your calls down in advance on a sheet of paper so you didn't have to search and hunt and peck? So, just if you could kind of talk about the ratios, how can you guide a person along on that?
Well, I think for me, it's always about quality over quantity. It's got to be researched. 1985 was just a little bit before I started, Jeff. So I remember record cards or the telephone books. Mm-hmm. Now, for my success in the telephone books, it would be about starting at Z, because everybody would just open the front cover.
There you go.
And be ringing the same people, over and over and over again. And most likely people kind of got to about H before they walked out and said, I hate this job. Yeah. Because that was how it was. So my success was going from Z back, because they'd never heard of anybody. Yeah. It's quite safe to say. Yeah. So when it comes to, I do talk about the numbers. The numbers for me are, what does your business need in terms of money? What growth are you looking for in terms of money, and reverse engineering that? Because if you are in a product, you're selling a product, and you need to sell 100 more of something at a tenner, then you've got to work out how much time and activity it takes, right, and how much of an uptake are you going to get? What is your conversion? If you're going to reach out to 100 customers and 90% of them are going to go, oh yeah, send me one of those for a tenner, you're in 10 off. Mm-hmm. So it's 110 to get you 100. Yeah. Whereas if you're doing, a high ticket solution sales, process-driven product, the sales cycle can be anything up to 7 years. So your 100 calls then are going to be about, the key to that is about finding out where they are in that cycle of 7 years. Right. Because you could be talking to them about it being a great product and adding great benefits and value to their business in how they're running. But then if they're only 2 years, if they're only 4 years, or if only 5 years into what they've already invested in, it doesn't matter how good it is. Yeah. They're not going to pay again to repeat a process. Yeah. So it does come back to having to understand what it is that your business needs. And if you're high ticket and it's, a $30,000, £30,000 sale, how many of those sales do you need to get your profit for your overhead costs? And I think this is where people forget their cost centers. You need to run your sales and marketing as a cost center to be able to know exactly, if you're, for example, in retail and that, now October, November, December is going to be a really, really busy period in the run up to Christmas. But then it all jumps off a cliff and, everybody disappears in January because they've spent all their money up front. So, to put sales on and to reduce the cost of things. So it's about using those same tactics and being able to say, well, where is there a hole in my activity going to come in my calendar? And this is why, I really, really get frustrated when the talk of recession or the talk of financial inflation and things like this, and they go, well, we're going to cut back on sales and marketing because that's our biggest overhead. Well, I'm so sorry to break it to you, but that is what is driving your business, not the board, not the accountants, counting the beans. It's the sales and marketing that should be driving to keep on top of those cycles. Right.
No, I mean, and again, those of us from the sales background, certainly understand that. But yeah, so I appreciate you touching on that. And I think that there's, and going back to the second part of that question, do you actually pre-write your phone calls down on a call list so that when you sit down at the phone, you don't have to hunt and peck for all that? Do you do that?
No, generally, the clients that I work with in the past have got CRM systems. So, they're working on things like HubSpot, Nimble, Pipedrive, you name it. Excel spreadsheets. I still love an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. So it's about populating those and you can keep a track of a company name, the person's name, the email address, the phone number, and you can put notes, you can put your first call, last call, next call, so you can data sort your columns and be able to really just sort of get the software to pre-populate today's activity and do that, and then you go to some new stuff, and a lot of what I teach my clients to do is to work their existing customer base, expand on that first, consolidate what you have, reignite some old relationships that you've maybe neglected before you start going after anything new, because unexpected things happen when you start talking to people that know you already. Recommendations, for example, or I'd forgotten that you do that. Right.
Bingo. Right. There's so much that can come from, just the customer base we have within. There's that expansionism of what we already have the groundwork laid out for, and we don't have to recreate that groundwork and re-engage in that. So yeah, no, I agree. Well, excellent. So scripts. I mean, are scripts? I know you said in your book you have a posture on them. What would you say about having phone scripts in front of you?
So here's my take on it. Hello, Jeff. My name's Wendy from Making Conversations Count. I'd like to talk to you today about you've switched off from listening already because you're just reading what's in front of you. Yeah. So whilst I do posture about scripts, I do believe that you need to have bullet points, that you do need to have an agenda and outcomes that you want to discover from those conversations. And my advice really is let the conversation go the way that the customer takes it.
Right.
And because you will know your product and you will know those bullet points, it doesn't matter in what order you take them on that journey, so long as you remain in control of the conversation, it doesn't matter. And it's a much better experience for you and them.
Yeah. Yeah. So to really kind of, what I think Wendy's saying in a large sense is, know what you sell, what your products and services are. But going back to one of the first things we talked about, inject that truth, that genuineness, that authenticity in there. People don't want that stale conversation. I said in my book, Wendy, I was looking for publishers, and one of the folks I talked to, you could tell this just, they answered the phone and I said, hi, I'm interested in possibly, having you take a look at my manuscript for publishing. And then they launched into this, fabricated speech. And I could remember, I was 45 seconds in, 50 seconds in, 55 seconds in, I said, there's no way. At 61 seconds, I said, there's no way I'm giving this company my 30-year project. No flipping way.
Yeah.
I mean, it just wasn't authentic, right? And so, yes, people do want, script. But now I'm going to expound on that. What about practicing and rehearsing and role playing to get comfortable with those types of scenarios?
Oh, now you see, I struggle with role playing because I know it's not real.
Okay. So
I end up being a bit mischievous. I tend to start giggling. I will say ridiculous things. So if I feel like that and I can put a sense of humour on it, then anybody with anxiety, it's going to be the worst experience of their life to attempt to role play.
Okay.
So my view on this is, look, pick up the phone, give it a try.
Okay.
Hey, I want to introduce what we do here, but I would like to understand how you're doing things at the moment. Put the ball in the customer's court to talk about themselves. Yeah. And it gets easier.
Interesting.
It just gets easier. And, even when you've made as many calls as me, because I can move from a different industry or a different product, everything you do is the same. But when you're testing out what to say and not to be jargon, too heavy on the jargon, and to be light and to be brief and to be friendly and approachable in what you say, bearing in mind that 7 seconds to create the impression, it is a lot of pressure. Yeah. And, even I go, oh, goodness. But when somebody asks you something and you're not quite sure because it's a new thing for you to do, just be honest and say, take a big deep breath and say, I'm just going to take a moment because I don't normally do this sort of thing. I don't normally call out. I wasn't quite sure how it was going to go. And you've asked me something that I probably need to give some time and thought to. So, here's what I'm thinking. So that just by explaining that you're uncomfortable in doing it in the first place, but really want to help that person, gives you the time to think in the background.
Okay.
And that person is going to go, well, do you know what? How many people are going to ring me up today? Yeah. And I ask them a question and them go, do you know what? I wasn't quite prepared for that. Yeah. They would try and bluff it. Yeah. They would try and they would lie. They would, come up with rubbish. Right. And I just think you can bring people on your side by not even knowing the answer to the question. Right. It's great that they're asking a question you don't know the answer to if you're meant to be an expert, because I'm going to go and find out and I'm going to let you know. Because if you've asked that, somebody else is going to ask that and I need to find out. And I'm quite new at doing this, so you've really helped me.
Yeah. Well, and it's a great opportunity. You've already baked in a second phone call just by answering the question, you've given yourself a reason to call. Yeah. Well, interesting take. I come from a sales background that has a lot of role playing in it. And in fact, just in getting prepared for my podcast, I knew I was going to do this a couple of years in advance. So I travel quite extensively in a car for my job. I have a sales agency on the side. And not on the side, it's my main job. This is my side hustle. But
this is what takes over all your mental energy because it's quite addictive. Yeah.
Exactly, 100%. So, but I would I'd turn the radio off at night and I'd drive along and I would just start role playing interviews. And I would just pretend I'm interviewing somebody about something. And what I wanted to do, and I did that 100 times or more. And the reason I did that is I wanted to know, so when I first got in front of a mic and got to talk to someone and interview them, I wanted to feel comfortable with my breathing, with my voice inflection, with my emphasis, with my questioning, with my lack of ums and ahs and and groping. And so, it was really a wonderful experience because by the time I got to the mic for the first time to interview someone, I had jitters, but I wasn't overly, stupefied and nervous and just, under the lights going, oh boy, what I get myself into. So, which leads me to just segue into, do you still get a little bit of the jitters when you sit down to get on the phone? Is there any nervousness at all?
Yeah, of course. I mean, when I tend to get on the phone these days, it's because I'm at a client's premise or we're on a group Zoom training session, and I very much go with, here, let me make some live calls. Listen to my calls.
Yeah.
And I know I've got an audience. Which, when you consider that I've been working remotely for 12 years, so I can say what I like.
Yeah.
Going into an office environment and having to make calls and knowing that people are listening, that's also an anxiety because you don't know, did I say something that somebody wouldn't like or...
Sure.
You have all sorts of thoughts, and certainly new starters, they're busy worrying about what they should be writing down or what they should be putting into the computer. And, it's about taking one step at a time, isn't it?
Right.
And, I always say the best thing to do is just listen to how easy it is. Because people say, Wendy, you make it sound so easy. And I'm like, but it is, because if you keep it simple, am I talking to the right person that looks after? So the reason that I'm calling is that we do this, but I'd like to find out how you do things now, because you might not need me today.
Right.
And I can let you get on with your day.
Yeah.
Great. So what we've established is that this is happening, that needs to happen. So the timing is going to be, can we agree?
Yeah.
So it's if you boil it down to just those three things, then the results look after themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for answering that. Breathing. Talk about, you mentioned earlier, we forget to breathe a lot properly on the phone, don't we?
Yeah.
So talk about that if you could, because you mentioned it in your book a couple times.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit like silence. It's such a powerful thing to do. When you're on the telephone, you only have one sense, and that is your hearing. So to the listeners and yourself, Jeff, I have my left ear is acutely attuned from wearing a headset on the phone for years. So that is my listening ear, and I have to sleep on it to get to sleep because it's constantly thinking, is that the cat? Is that the dog? Yeah. Is that my daughter? Is she asleep? So this is another tool. We talk about our voice and, losing your voice and hurting your voice because you're not being true to yourself. Your hearing is equally important for you to be able to to really actively listen to what it is that they're saying. So, of course, when you're speaking and breathing, the other person gets that too. You know, it's kicking in their instincts to what it is that you're doing. Now, don't suggest heavy breathing on anybody. It's not a good plan. But, you know, we can tell that these are traits of our body language that leaks out when we're speaking. Yeah. Similarly, allowing silence.
Are you suggesting that builds the connectivity better with the person you're on the phone with?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. Because these are our primal instincts through conversation, where we take, you know, if you play the game, would you rather go blind or go deaf? What would you rather?
Yeah, I would rather, I guess, go blind. I'd rather be able to hear.
Yeah, and this is, you know, what leans into personality types. I play this game with my daughter. Would you rather? She would rather go deaf. She'd rather see what's going on. And I'm like, how much more would you miss? Yeah. Much the same as, you know, if you were to go dumb, if you lost your voice. There's so many things that you can do to counterbalance that now with technology and things like that. But, you know, these are our primal instincts, and this is what we tap into as personality types.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, I appreciate that. So in your book, you talk about as we look at our results of calling, testing and measuring. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, testing and measuring. I mean, you'll know your instinct is that if you've said something, it didn't quite flow right and it didn't land well with the other person at the end of the phone. So in the test and measurement there, you change it. You know, and it's about considering the words and the language that you use. So avoid using the word trying. You know, when you know, a coach said to me once, here's a pen, Wendy. Here's my hand. The pen is on my hand. Now try to lift it.
Okay.
You can't do anything with the pen because trying doesn't do anything. So that's an important point when you're talking language, is to use positive and powerful words. Presumptive words, so that it embodies confidence in you. So testing and measuring those things. Otherwise, you know, if you're trying a different market, you know, I have clients that say, we need a new vertical market. And I go, oh, great. What are you thinking? You know, and they'll go, well, we do so well with this type, you know. So, for example, I worked a long time with a CGI company because I love it because it's creative. And they would work with house builders, creating, you know, off-plan images of what the house will look like when it's built. And it's still a plot of land.
Sure.
So it's great working with house builders, but there's only an a finite number of house builders for them to be able to say, hey, do you want to use my services? Come and work with us.
Right.
So I said, well, what about architects? There's commercial, you know, architects have to do this. There's planning departments, there's this and that. So limit yourself to, you know, a set of data. You know, say 10 of each new thing. Make those calls and plot the progress. And whilst one thing may seem like it's not working quick enough, it may be that it's just going to take longer because of the type of market. So then it's about understanding how much of one thing and another thing. So, you know, it's like cold, warm, hot, kind of data that you can flood in. And if you see that you're going to have a gap in 6 months' time, and you know that one particular data set takes about 6 months, start that now.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Now, thank you for measuring. And I'm just going to use an example of a lawn service. Let's say a lawn maintenance service. Let's just say if you get someone's yard, if you cut lawns, and you get a job at cutting someone's yard, you might get 22 cuttings. Let's say 20 cuttings a year out of it, right? Because you start in April in the U.S. and you might end in November. And if you're charging $50 a cutting, well, you know what 20 times 50 equals. And you know how many times you can cut, you know how long it takes you to cut a lawn. So you know how in the course of a week, right, how many lawns you could cut at $50. But, in getting new business, you know what the value is of that customer, right? It's $1,000. So you know that every customer you get is $1,000. And the measurement part comes in when you're on the phone. If you start charting what you're doing, and just tell me if you agree with this and expand on it if you will. But if you're that lawn cutting service person and you go out and you make 5 phone calls a day to try to get new clients, and you happen to get every other day a new client. Now you know that it takes you 10 phone calls to get a client. So now you can start managing that number. Do I make 10 phone calls a day? Do I settle for just 5 a day? Do I want to end up with 5 new clients at the end of a week, or only 3 or 2.5, whatever, and you start really looking at this, because there is a number that you can put on that, and you can measure it, and then you can manage that effectively to use the phone as your partner in your vehicle. But you've got to start charting things from moment one. Talk about that if you could a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I would say is that you've also got to be mindful that who it is that you're calling is not too far geographically, that you're spending all your time traveling between lawn and lawn, because that will eat into your profitable time as well. But you're absolutely right, Jeff, to be able to leverage that, you're going to be in an area, so you can canvass that area, means that you can spend all day cutting lawns, and, fill your day with effectively paid money. So how would you measure that going forward? Just start. It is as simple as that, isn't it? You may have a process already, but start now. Notice now. Become conscious and aware of that now, because then that will give you the data to maybe get a help cutting the lawns.
Yep.
It could be another guy, another gal, and another mower. How much would that cost? Is that another truck?
Right.
How would you grow that? Is that a different area? Is there a greater demand somewhere? Do people not have lawns in another area? It's the detail then that you'll get into, rather than just a list of numbers.
Yeah. Well, and when I was a rookie salesperson in New York City, they gave us buildings as a territory, and they sent us out for cold calls, so physical cold calls a day. So the ratios were: you knock on 35 doors, you're going to get 14 presentations, or you're going to get 14 people that you can talk to out of that 35. You're going to get 7 presentations. You're going to get 3 test and evaluations, and you'll get 1 sale. So you pretty much knew, and you know what? They were right. As you measured this, that's the way it happened, And so if you could make sure you did the 35 physical cold calls a day, the law of averages where you ended up with 1 sale out of that whole process, no matter how it worked out. So, it's the same thing with the phone, and so I just encourage, especially young business owners who have switched to the phone, who have gone away from different forms of trying to solicit for business. Again, I couldn't recommend a better book for you. It's just straight to the point, easy to read, and Wendy cuts right to the chase on how to do some of this stuff. And it really is it really is so easy when it comes down to it. We just tend to make it so hard, and because we're losing that touch with that conversation, process, it's becoming harder, I think, as a byproduct of that societal condition. And so I just say, get the book and look into it. A couple more things. Building trust, we kind of talked about. The 3-strike rule. What's the 3-strike rule? So I'm a young business owner. Wendy, tell me, what's the 3-strike rule,
Well, I love my 3-strike rule because it allows you to move on. And it comes back to the timing thing. If you are going to have, say, 50 quality researched prospects, let's call them prospects, and you know already that you may have conversations with people who answer the phone, but they're not the right person. Or you can use that leverage of that right person to sort of say, oh, well, I'm calling from, it was just about, I'll try again. Maybe if I send them some information on email, they'll know what it's about and they can, tell me either way whether it's, any good for them. People like that option. Mm-hmm. So when it then comes to you can't get hold of somebody and you've got an email and you've sent an email, then you try to follow it up. I would say leave a message. If you get the option to leave a message, leave a message. Mm-hmm. Just say what you would normally say had they have answered the phone. Mm-hmm. Hey, it's Wendy. I just wanted to introduce this. I just wanted to find out what you're doing now. I'll send you an email. Next call. Hey, it's Wendy again. I hope you did get the email. Mm-hmm. Just hadn't heard one way or the other whether it was of interest. I'll try you again. So all you're doing is managing that expectation every time. And I'll try you one last time. Right? So then there's your third strike. You try. I'm just try you one last time. I still think it's something that you'd be interested in because I've not heard that it's not. You've not emailed me back to say it's not. So I'll put you in my forward diary for later because I'm guessing it's just a timing thing.
Yeah. Bingo.
And that 3-strike rule means that the effort that you've put into introducing the company, that the effort that you've gone to have, a fairly generic marketing piece email to send and back up that phone call could still be driving traffic to your website, could still be driving traffic to your social media platforms. And if you then do call them back in sort of 6 months' time, you've just delivered your first promise.
Yeah. Bingo. Guys, this is so great, right? Because, we talked about that you baked in the necessity for a second phone call before. Here you've baked in the process, the ability to show someone you're a promise maker and a promise keeper. And bingo. I mean, it's just so, and in the art of business, those things become building blocks because they form trust. They show that, hey, this person's really doing what they said they were going to do. I'm going to get one more question, then we're going to jump into a topic I know is near and dear to you. But you failed, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, in your book, if I read it right, you failed at 2 businesses like I did. My first venture in with my father, 3-4 years after we started, I was penniless, and I just had thrown everything at it, and it limped. Didn't work as well as we thought. We didn't know our market the way we should, and I was penniless. So you failed in your company, first 2 company endeavors. Talk about the lessons of failure. How important is failure in the scheme of success for people?
Well, I would say that there is a big difference between failing and failure.
Okay.
I don't see the previous 2 businesses as failures.
Okay.
They were part and parcel of the journey and the learning. And my first business was with a business partner. We were two young single mums, and we set up a distribution company. And it was great fun. And the reason that, it didn't close because of any failing, other than that my head was turned after a divorce to another man, and I decided to relocate. And that was back in the day when you couldn't do all of this sort of technology thing. So I left the business with the business partner to continue running. So the business carried on until such time as she decided that she was going to be doing something different. That was a terrible thing, because what I feel that failed was that I put my personal choices before the business, and that didn't go down well with my business partner. She didn't want to be left on her own with it. So I would say that the lesson that I learned in that was, if you're going to go into business with somebody, you really do have to talk about death. And I mean that in the instance of the worst case scenario that, you know, life can throw at you, that if I were to die, what would you do? Am I intrinsic to this business? Because if I am, we've got to have a plan B. You know, if you were to go, what would happen? So you do really have to do your eventuality planning.
Excellent. So lessons learned out of those situations where, you know, that you failed in this regard or that regard, or you just flat out had a failure.
Yeah.
There's so much good to get out of that. And again, I would encourage anybody to look at it that way. Well, very good. Thanks for answering that. And so let's talk about something that's very near and dear to you. And I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but how important is LinkedIn? Just talk about LinkedIn. How important is that today?
Do you know, LinkedIn has been a big part of my business for about 12 years.
Okay.
I understood very quickly the power of it from a business point of view. I used it in recruitment. I saw that there was an ability to match people. You know, I was a people to business matcher. And then as it's evolved, you know, it's become the way that you can reach people. You know, it's got its own gatekeeping, if you like, that's replaced the telephone, or instead of the telephone, or of the telephone. You know, you can do one or the other or both. And that's what I love, is there is an extension of those ways to start a conversation. That's what I love about LinkedIn.
Yeah, well, folks, I will tell you what, Wendy does get into the weeds on LinkedIn in this book, and she really does. You do, Wendy, a really good job of breaking that down. I think I counted them. I think there's 10 or 12 pages devoted to LinkedIn in here. So, folks, if you're saying, this book isn't for me, but I don't really make phone calls. If you want to understand LinkedIn a little better, buy the book, right? I mean, really, Jeff, I mean, what I would say to anybody who buys the book, read it cover to cover.
Yep. Then go back and start at the beginning. Yeah. It is designed for you with white space to write in it. Right. So write your initial thoughts, then go back. And by the time you've got to the end, you'll understand the whole process. Right. Very often we start something, we get the first bite of information and we go rushing off to get that in place, not fully understanding the cycle of it. So read it cover to cover and go back. And ultimately, you know, if you don't like picking up the phone, then that part of the book is a great way for you to use LinkedIn as the icebreaker to start those conversations. It takes the anxiety away.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it really becomes too, in addition to that, you know, it's just your professional statement piece on social media today. You know, it's really where you can effectively communicate without saying anything necessarily in some cases to people. So take some stock in building that out the right way. And I've certainly learned some things from it. So thank you so much. So WAG, just how you're set up in your business right now. Are you set up to help medium or large businesses or entrepreneurs or all of the above? How are you set up for your consulting?
My business coach really gets on a line with me because I've helped a magician in just a half a day take his business somewhere. And then I've worked with PLC companies. So my stance on this is, if you need help reigniting motivation, confidence, conversations in your business, then I can help.
Okay. Do you have, is there any process that people go through? Do you have a website you want to mention that people could go to?
Yeah, sure. Wagassociates.com is got all the details about the power up sessions, the 12-week program, the corporate training, the consultancy. I don't tend to wrap everything up like a script, as we've already discovered, right, Jeff. Right. I everything I do is purely based on their circumstances and their challenges. Yeah. And that's what keeps me alive.
Yeah. Well, very good. A lot of virtual too. Your assistance is virtual based as well?
Yes. Yeah. It's in the main virtual, because where I live now in Scotland, it's about an hour to anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Well, you're in a very pretty part of the world too. I love it. I love the pictures. I've been to London, haven't been up to Scotland yet, but I've been to London a couple times, and it's...
You're welcome to visit, Jeff.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I may take you up on that someday. My wife would love to go. So, Wendy, just a couple more questions, and I'd really like to just ask, is there anything before we kind of steer this to a conclusion that I forgot to ask you? Is there something you want to bring up that I didn't ask?
Well, I would just say that to carry on the conversation, make sure you reach out on LinkedIn. Yep. Send me a message and say, hey, I was listening to you and Jeff.
Right.
And if you've got any questions, ask me anything. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, great. Well, that's how Wendy found me. Wendy contacted me, and I said, looked, and we had to put a Zoom call together and talked a little bit. And I just, I find you fascinating, very delightful, Wendy, very comforting, very easy to understand. Again, folks, I mean, honestly, how many hours? 2.5 hours to read it front to back, and then, like Wendy said, go back to the beginning again. So great job on that. Very helpful. And Wendy, we finish every show by going back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, music. What's the one song that really resonates with you in your life that you'd like to share with us that's kind of your lost in the shuffle track, if you will?
So this took me a lot of thinking, because when Elvis died, nobody told me for years, because I was a big Elvis fan. So that takes you back to when I was about 6 or 7. But this particular song that I've picked goes right back to when I was that 17-year-old girl that wanted to drop out of school and get a paid job so I could leave home and get some peace in my life. And this song would come on, and I just heard that I'd got the job that I should never, ever have been picked for.
Wow.
So it takes me back to that time. It is Yaz, The Only Way Is Up.
Interesting. Yeah. Great. So Yaz, very, very interesting, from the UK, 1983. I found out she was actually with a band called The Biz, SimpleBiz360. I don't know, that's
spooky.
Yeah, she was in a band called The Biz in 1983. And in 1988, this song came out. And it actually went to number 1 in the UK, stayed there for 5 weeks. She had a number 2 song that came out the next year. Didn't really, travel across the pond to the US, from what I can tell. It really didn't chart out here, but very upbeat song, very pleasant song, very just, definitely puts a happy, beat in your step listening to it. So I could see how, wow, that would really connect with you at that point in time, because you were now off to the races, and what a fine job you have done with the racing for your career. So we applaud you on that. Thank you so much for that Lost in the Shuffle track. Folks, you're going to find it up on a little card. We don't actually play the tune on our website, but on the YouTube experience, you'll see a little card in the upper right-hand corner, and you click onto that, and that'll take you to the YouTube version of this that we put up there. So, Wendy, we're going to have all your contact information on the show notes. We're going to have your book. Again, you can find it on Amazon. Here it is if you want to just take a screenshot of it. Wendy, what's the title of your website again, and what are the other social media? What's your LinkedIn profile, if you could?
So you'll find me under Wendy Harris. It's very easy. My headline says Queen of Conversation. You'll find me at wagassociates.com. But you can also search makingconversationscount.com and you'll find my podcast that's all about helping entrepreneurs how to in business and the conversations that changed business leaders' lives.
Nice. Excellent. And where can they find that? On Apple, Stitcher, Spotify?
Yeah, literally, if you type in Making Conversations Count into Amazon, you'll find the show and the book.
Okay,
So yeah, you should find it come up first page everywhere.
Good. And folks, I think we may be on there someday. So you may find a Simple Biz being interviewed there someday. So which would be a lot of fun. Well, Wendy, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. We are honored to have you on. We wish you all the best coming up on this holiday season. And again, we just can't thank you enough for being part of the show today.
Oh, it's been my absolute pleasure. It's been a conversation that's counted.
There you go, folks. And with that sign off, we will see you in 168 hours. Thanks so much. Thanks, Wendy.